Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and for those of you that don't know who I am what you would call a big nerd. I'm very big on learning about obscure or behind-the-scenes facts for things I follow, so much so that I've even run quite a bit of Death Battle trivia on my community tab. I was trying to figure out how to turn this kind of thing into a video for a while, and today I got the idea to talk about Death Battle episodes that were very close to happening, but ultimately did not. A decent amount of this might be seen as common knowledge for a few people watching, but there's gonna be at least some people who barely know any of this, I'm sure, and I thought this would be an interesting topic anyway. Now, I am gonna be playing a little fast and loose with the title of this video, but not too fast and loose. We've heard about combatants like Joker, who had other opponents considered for him at the time, like Green Goblin and Kefka. Same with Ben 10, like Beast Boy and Danny Phantom, among other examples. In my opinion, a group of simple considerations is not really enough to constitute episodes that almost happened, but if something was considered a real frontrunner or straight up was the plan at one point or another, that to me is worth bringing up here. And of course, there might be other similar instances that I'm just not aware of. Feel free to leave them in the comments below, but with that out of the way, let's go. So in my opinion, the best way to start this off is by mentioning the original 2-season pitch for Death Battle that Ben Singer made before the show even started. As you can see, there were a lot of matchups proposed that did make the final cut at one point or another, but also a lot that were altered and delayed. Some of the most interesting ones to me being Goomba versus Burgertime Hotdog instead of Koopa, which meant we never would have gotten this masterpiece, the TMNT Battle Royale winner versus the White Ranger instead of Zitz, which probably would have wiped this episode from existence too, Master Chief versus Duke Nukem, apparently, instead of Doom Guy, and Naruto versus Luffy as episode 23 of the series, which is insane to think about now. It is important to keep in mind that this pitch was made incredibly early in the process. We don't know how late anything was changed, but these were all highly considered at least at one point, and this whole thing is just too interesting to leave out, so there you go. Now we get into more individual instances where we were given some extra information about matchups in podcasts, Q&As, etc. A big one that I think a lot of people are already aware of is Kirby vs. Ditto. This was one of Kirby's most popular matchup ideas at the time, and Death Battle was fully prepared to do it at first. After doing even some of the most basic research on Kirby, they determined that he was too powerful for that fight, and Ditto was promptly swapped out for Majin Buu as Death Battle's 40th episode. As controversial as that episode was at the time, I do think it was for the best given what we got out of it, and I could see Kirby coming back at some point, but I doubt it would be against Ditto. Although anything could happen, I suppose. Next up, we have one that's very interesting to me, Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Sylvester Stallone. Now, before anyone accuses Death Battle of having wanted to put more real people into episodes, this was meant to be a fight between all of Arnold's characters rolled into one and all of Sylvester's. So on Arnold's side, you would have had the Terminator, Dutch from Predator, etc., and on Sylvester's, you would have had characters like Rocky Balboa and Rambo. I'm not sure if this episode was planned before or after Terminator vs. RoboCop's release. If it was before, it's quite possible they just decided to do that episode in place of it. If not, then it's hard to say. We don't have any real confirmation on the matter. It is a fun thought though, and I could see Death Battle doing something in a similar vein later if they felt so inclined. Fast forwarding to season 4, we have Indiana Jones versus someone. Death Battle was always planning on doing a fight with archaeologists who were also crazy strong adventurers, and Indiana Jones was like the constant to start. It was going to be him versus Lara Croft or Nathan Drake. However, as to be expected, Lara versus Nathan got more support than any match with Indy, so they just went with that. Some people had their problems with this episode, but frankly, I think there would have been a lot of vocal outrage if Death Battle just didn't do it. It was a staple of Death Battle requests since basically the beginning. Death Battle could naturally put Indy against one of these two later, or someone else entirely, but obviously there's no confirmation one way or the other. We'll just have to see. Also in season 4 was the possibility of seeing Ichigo fight Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho as opposed to Naruto. This one is pretty similar to the last one. Ichigo versus Yusuke was the original idea for the episode, but at the time Naruto versus Ichigo was significantly more widely requested amongst viewers, so they went with that instead. What's more interesting to me, however, is that considering Naruto versus Luffy was in the 2-season pitch, I'm curious if that was still the eventual plan for those characters until they switched Yusuke with Naruto. Either way, I don't think think either of those other matchups are guaranteed for the future now, but I also wouldn't rule them out. Anime protagonist matchups tend to get buzz, so it's tough to say. Moving onward to Season 5, Scarlet Witch vs. Raven was also a very likely possibility at the time. At first, Death Battle assumed they would put Raven against either Scarlet Witch or Jean Grey, as they were prominently suggested, but Death Battle determined that Raven was too weak to fight either of them and swapped them out for Twilight Sparkle. Obviously, Jean vs. Raven doesn't make this list because it did eventually happen, and its result is quite ironic, to say the least. Scarlet Witch vs. Zatanna was ultimately the right fight to go with, so I'm happy it worked out that way, and given what we've gotten, I doubt Scarlet Witch vs. Raven will ever happen, and I doubt that'll disappoint too many people, but still interesting to note. Another matchup that got scrapped kind of similarly, but also pretty differently, was All Might vs. Captain Falcon. Not only did Death Battle later feel the power gap might have been too wide, presumably in favor of All Might looking at the numbers given for them in their episodes, but Death Battle was also contacted by Warner Media, which owns Rooster Teeth, requesting them to include a Mortal Kombat character around that time. Thus, All Might was swapped out for Johnny Cage, and pushed back to the end of Season 6 to fight Might Guy. I think All Might vs. Captain Falcon could have been fun personally, and I think you could make arguments for either depending on what you buy, but I won't complain about how things turned out. We got fun episodes out of it, and that's good enough for me. And speaking of the end of Season 6, the finale was originally gonna be Broly vs. Asura, but after deciding to put All Might against Might Guy, the Death Battle team was more invested in that matchup and considered the original finale for later. By the time the Season 7 lineup was being finalized, Death Battle felt Hulk was a more appropriate opponent for Broly, and that fight coincidentally was considered many times throughout Death Battle's run before the stars eventually aligned for it as the Season 7 finale. I can't imagine they would go back to Broly vs. Asura, at least not for a long time, but for all we know, Kratos vs. Asura could go all the way in the Tournament of Champions, so we'll find out how that all unfolds soon enough. Moving to something much more recent, Death Battle confirmed that both Dimitri and Claire from Claymore were highly considered for Guts' return to the show, something they knew they wanted to do for many years. However, part of wanting to bring Guts back involved giving him a 3D fight, and reportedly only Dimitri had a 3D model to work with. They also recognized how much viewers wanted Fire Emblem to get an episode, so ultimately there was more pointing to it. Personally, I was always more on the side of Guts vs. Dimitri, and I think the final product was quite fantastic, so I don't have any complaints with that decision. Although I am sorry to those who would have preferred Claire, since I know a decent amount of people felt that way. It could still happen, but definitely not for a long time. And lastly, a fight that Death Battle has brought up a few times as something they planned on doing before is Son Goku vs. Sailor Moon. Yep, Goku could have fought someone who was not Superman. We know Death Battle was thinking about this matchup soon after the first Goku vs. Superman, but obviously that kind of got derailed by Goku vs. Superman 2, and then after Dragon Ball Super was well underway, they came to the conclusion that Goku had grown more powerful than Moon, and at that point they weren't incredibly comfortable with making a fight that's just Goku beating the crap out of a teenage girl. Now you can take all that information however you want, but considering that, the support for Moon vs. Madoka, and the fact that Beerus vs. Galaxia got taken down from YouTube, I find this episode happening incredibly unlikely now. Let's just hope the new Goku vs. Superman will be a fun time. So yeah, that's everything I gotta say about this topic. There are most definitely a lot of other instances like this that Death Battle just hasn't revealed to us, and again, if you're aware of any other examples, you can leave them in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, but either way, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next video. Peace out.